T.
Miss 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 T.
Can't wait for you to meet Miss T. She is the T in tea.
Welcome to Sweet Tea Time. What a year. So if anything in your universe was like anything in my universe, it has been a year of peaks and valleys and a lot of like action in between. So today, I hope that we could walk through together the different steps, maybe even some tools that can help you prepare for another year of adventure, growth, and excitement. So first things first, every year I document my year day by day. Now, for some people, this is an overwhelming thought. So I'm going to take you to the most extreme side of things, which is where I have a propensity to live. And then I'll take you to a more simpler side of things, where if you're just getting started in planning, dreaming, goal setting, preparing, it'll give you some easy steps to start with. I document my day in the form of a planner. Now, I've spent years trying to find the right planner, and I even feel like I still need to make a planner. But this particular planner is, I like binders, so I put everything in a binder, and it's every day I have a layout, and this particular layout is a day timer planner. And I put it in a small binder. The bigger ones didn't work for me, didn't fit in my bags, things like that. So I have, the smaller size. And what I do is I document my day. Now this planner, and I haven't found one yet that starts as early as I start, so I have to handwrite things in. But it gives you the hour by hour structure of things. It gives you your action items on one side, but then there's another page where you can make notes. So as you're achieving these things, you can document, yes, I learned this. This was really good. This doesn't work. And here are my action items. So every day has 2 pages. And then prior to the day, there's a year at a glance. Now, I try to use this, but my schedule's really gnarly. So I only put like the high things, like the big things, or the things that I really need to recall. And then I use my Google Calendar for the minute calendar things. But this gives me a good strong month at a glance. So this is my daily setup. So every year I set one of these up. Now this holds a quarter. So I do this by quarter. Then I have to switch everything out for each quarter. And it's really great because then I can take notes. I can say, okay, what got accomplished, what didn't get accomplished, and push it to the next month. I can also add things like, okay, if this didn't work in the first quarter by way of doing my daily planning actions, I can shift it. So the reason I don't put the whole year in here is because sometimes I change the way I do things day to day, or how I structure things day to day. So again, this is what I start with as far as a daily planner guide. And then at the end of the year, this is what my whole year looks like for every day. Now, some people think like, good gravy, T, that's a whole lot. But let me tell you why I do this. This is very important, especially if you're like me in that legacy is very important to you. Legacy is important to me. And the reason I do this is so that one day I'm not going to be here. Or one day people are going to wonder, how did she build what she built? Now you have a roadmap by year so that anybody could come along, study these different things that I did every day, my habits, my practices, my action items, my phone calls, things like that. And again, it's light touch stuff, but it's a day-to-day journaling, if you will, of how I build what I build. And I've been doing this particular process since 2013 when I got a mandate to dream bigger. I sat in a meeting with a mentor of mine at the time, and I told him all my big dreams and all my big goals. And this is someone who recognized my potential. And he told me, to my face, very bold, very straight. I almost started crying a little bit. He said to me, you have got to get some bigger dreams. And so I knew if I was going to go on the journey of stretch as it pertains to dreaming bigger and doing more and going global, that I would have to have a system that not only helped me manage my time, but manage each day so that I'm accomplishing these things in bite size that point me, that guide me, that get me in the direction of these bigger dreams. And I got that mandate in 2013, and I will tell you this, every handful of years, that mandate comes around again. So again, the ultimate goal in documenting each day as one, so that years from now, others have a roadmap and how to keep building forward. And two, people have a chronicle, or I have a chronicle of what it took to push things forward, build things better, or what I needed to do things differently just to get some different outcomes. And then the other thing that I do, and again, extreme end of the spectrum, let's move a little bit this way. Another thing that I do is I start out with something simple like this little notebook. Now, this little notebook, this is how I got started. So every year I have one of these things, and it goes back before I started doing my daily plan, where I would just document what I want to do, who I want to become, how I want my businesses to evolve. And it's just simple little lists. So if you're not an everyday kind of person, if you're not an every week kind of person, but maybe you're an every month kind of person, and you can just kind of hit some highlights that you want to tackle, this is a great place to start. So I'll tell you this, every year I have a theme, or I call my word for the year. And that word really does govern how the year unfolds and how I unfold in it. And so for the past several years, I'll give you just a few of them. I'll give you some of my words for the year, and I track them in every single one of these that I do. My word for the year, I'll give you my last 6. Fly. And really that year was the year that I really took off and went to a completely different altitude in my career, in my business building, and in my personal life. The next year was soar. So I took off flying one year, but the next year I kind of accelerated and I maintained altitude, and I just kind of locked my wings and soared in what I built the previous year. And then the next year, my word was yes. Okay, so this was a really hard year because I didn't say no to a lot. I said yes to a lot. And in saying yes to a lot, I mean, you talk about doors that were opened, you talk about experiences that I never would have had because my personality is some kind of way, or because the kind of company I was keeping is some kind of way. So that next year was yes. And then that next year, 23, was explosion. And I would say that's the year that we concretely went multi-city, multi-state, borderline international, in person and virtual. When I say explosion, there indeed was explosion in so many different areas of my life, but definitely career-wise. So much so that I almost had a bit of a challenge keeping up with my own personal growth, and I had to start carving out respite times, or like pause times, just so I can be with myself, so I can see who I had become, because I was exploding and things were growing at such nuclear pace that everything around me was changing, and I was having to figure me out to keep up with me and the explosion and the growth of business and things like that. I would also say visibility for me changed in that year. So, awards and accolades and interviews and publications, like everything really truly exploded in this year. And then the next year, my word was joy. And I think that was the year that I gave myself permission to, I'm a hard worker, I work hard, but I wasn't playing well. And I think that was the year that I experienced a depth of joy in several different areas. I traveled more. I developed different relationships with different kinds of people in different realms and different levels. And so the fun experience for me changed. It wasn't just things that I could do locally, it's things that I started doing globally. It was really a joy-filled year, almost like childlike joy. Now, again, these are words that they just come to me, but they do dictate the year. And then this next year, it was shine. Now, the reason that particular word was such a big deal for me is because organically, I'm a little bit of a hider. I'm still like a little shy. And so this word shine meant visibility from, and then posture visibility. So I wasn't just, sharing my light locally. I was sharing my light from a very different, place and height. And so for me, it's been a year of learning to be okay with being elevated in a way through leadership and through know-how and entrepreneurship, where I could be a light for other people. So this word shine really did grace me differently to show up in the world from a different place and brighten the path for a lot of people. So in this little book, I put my words for each year. The other thing I do, and this is just by way of reminder, I'm a little studious, so I like to define these words. So I put a definition of the word, and then I put names for myself. Sometimes when you're in the thick of things, you can forget who you are, and I kind of mentioned that before, but things can grow at such a rapid pace that you forget you. And so not the you that you look at in the mirror every day, but the one who evolves. And I think doing something like this is a preventative thing for things like imposter syndrome. And I hear that pretty frequently, but I think that elevation syndrome can be confused with imposter syndrome. And the reason, I offer that is because sometimes you can scale and increase and grow so quickly that you think that you're an imposter someplace when really you just rose to the level very, very quickly. And so that shift in altitude can sometimes make you question who you are and where you're showing up and how you're showing up. And so I document not my characteristics, but the identity of T, so that as I rise, especially if I rise quickly, I can always have a reference point that anchors me in who the truth of T is. It doesn't matter what level I am, what floor I'm on in life, because the truth of T is the truth of T. And so I document that here so that, the things like imposter syndrome can't wiggle its way in, because things get a little challenging for you by way of growth when you start questioning whether or not you're enough to be where you're at. You're where you're at because that's where you're supposed to be. And so as long as you remember the core of who you are, and again, I'm a huge fan of writing things down, it kind of eliminates the insecurity that complements growth. So another thing that I put in here is, notes, things that are like revelatory to me, things that make me go, aha, things that make me go, wow, like that's life-changing, things that shift my paradigm and how I think and how I behave and how I show up in the world and how I help other people. I document here. I think there's something to be said about keeping track of the breadcrumbs that get you closer to your destiny. And most often things happen in people's lives and they don't document it. And so you can arrive to this great place, but how you got there and then the different steps that you took escape you. I think those things are critical. And I think that if you don't remember those sorts of things, then you can forget the journey that made the person. And it's the journey that's important, not necessarily the arrival point. And so I make sure that I document all of my breadcrumbs, because when I get to the fun candy house and I'm enjoying all the things that the candy house has, I want to remember the path that I took, just in case I ever have to go back and pull somebody else or guide somebody else along the same path to their destiny. Documentation and legacy go together. Remember that. If it's your goal to leave your mark, if it's your goal to stamp your brand, if it's your goal to show up in this world and really, really, truly do your part, you should be documenting as much as possible so that you can make sure that the world knew you were here and you showed up and did your job. Another thing that I do is I document my goals, my dreams, and I'll do something called the Big 10, which I keep in this book, and another book. I document my Big 10. What are my Big 10? What are my big, broad stroke Big 10? And for me, it's sometimes, what I want to do with my organizations in the next 10 or 15 years, Big 10, or it's something that I know that I have to get accomplished in this year that points to something else. So I have 10 things that I keep my vision on pretty consistently every day. So the Big 10 go in this book, and then I do a copy of it in my daily. So my daily is reflecting what my Big 10 are. It's my driving force, it's my North Star. And I start with my Big 10 here. Again, Big 10 goals, Big 10 dreams. And those are two completely different things. So a goal is your bite-sized daily activities that lead you to this checkbox thing that you can do. But your dream is a thing that you build interiorly, and it spans time, it spans matter. It's not something that can be held in your hand on any one day in time and has an arrival date time stamp. It's the thing that can keep evolving again and again and again and again, because you're dreaming about it, and the more you change, the dream grows, evolves, develops, but the core of it is still the truth of you. And so those two things, I have a Big 10 for my goals and I have a Big 10 for my dreams. And I build those here. And then lastly, I just kind of keep notes. I like to document, how the things around me change, things that work, things that were bad. It's almost like there's a little section in here for journaling. I like to track when I had really crappy moments, because those moments also shape me. Yes, the victories are really wonderful to, catalog, but also the things that didn't work, the things that hurt me, the things that made me stumble, the things that made me feel like I failed. Because failure is not bad. It should be teaching you something. But I also track those things. I date those things in something like this. And then lastly, anything that I want to push forward into the next year, anything that I want to learn, anything that I want to be stronger with, I document in in the back of this. And then I'm a faith person. I believe that there's a God, and he's much more magnificent than I ever have the capacity to be, but he also guides. And so I like to keep track when I have moments that feel miraculous to me, because those moments remind me that this is a big world in a big galaxy, in a big universe, and I get to be a part of it, and I'm a little sand-like part of it, but I'm still a part of it. And that means that if things didn't work out for me today, this thing is still going around, and there's a firm possibility that it's going to work out better for me tomorrow. So I remind myself not to boil everything down to myself. Keep the mindset that I'm a piece in a very big puzzle, and I as long as I do my part, then all the things keep going around, and then as they're going around, I keep feeding as I'm getting fed, and it all just kind of works together, and it's just bigger than me. So it makes some of the challenging moments not so challenging when you know that you're part of a whole huge thing, and the ultimate goal, desire of the bigger thing is that things go well for me. So it helps me to build my faith, and in doing that, there are certain things that come from my spiritual leaders, my spiritual guides, and they'll give words for the year. They'll give me words throughout the year, things that are specific to me and my realm of belief, but also things that are specific to the entire world and the function and the path and the transition of things. And so I write those down so I can keep them in mind, that I'm a part of a very big team, and what I do contributes to that team, and what that team does contributes to my life. And as long as we're on the same page, we can march in harmony or in cadence with one another. So I keep my faith-based things in this little book too. Now I know that sounds like a lot, but it's where I really started, and every year I do one of these in conjunction with one of these. And so I got myself all set up for 2026. I was just finishing up my 2025, and that's something that I think that we need to talk about, finishing the task. Some people get so excited to start the new year that they don't land the current year that we're in really, really well. And so what I've done also for 2025 in this little book and in my day-to-day is I make a list of loose ends. What are your loose ends? Now, it's not just things that you need to check off your box, like pay this bill or, finish writing this thing. It can be things emotionally too. What are things that you want to finish the task on so that you don't carry the weight of these things into next year? And some of those things are emotional things. And so I make a list of all of my loose ends, and I firmly recommend you do the same. And you can do that in this book, and you can go down this thing, and you can put some intentionality about finishing the task strong before you start the fresh and new, which I'm about to get into. And so again, making your list of loose ends for the end of the year, it doesn't matter how much time you have left. You can do so much when you concentrate on the so much that you have to do. I promise you. So making a list of loose ends, 1, helps you end the year strong. 2, helps you start the next year clean, clear, and stronger. And so making a list of loose ends before you retire your year should help you start the new year really, really strong. Now, what I do top of year is a couple of things. 1, I revisit my 3 to 5, my 10 and my 15-year goals, and I keep them in something that I call my lab book. This is the thing that I return to every single year at the last quarter of the year to make sure that where I'm taking my life over the next couple of decades is not rigidly scripted, but definitely in line with who I become and who I want to become, and where I want everything connected to me to kind of, go in the direction of. So when I first got the mandate that I mentioned earlier to dream bigger, I didn't know how to do that. And so I got one of these lab books. This is my 3rd one. And again, it's like 10, 15 years is what I keep in one of these. And I just started making a list in, I didn't know what was big. In my world, I graduated from things like needing government assistance, being homeless, being a single mom, and raising 3 kids on a very fixed income. Like, I'm not that person anymore. But when I was that person, what was big to me was like gas in the tank and my bills paid and not being in debt. And so I started with that as a list, and I wrote 115 things that I wanted. And someone asking that question, that's still a hard question for people to answer, and it's still it can be a little bit of a challenge for me to answer, like, what do you want? And so I couldn't answer that question when I first started this process of planning, resetting, and rebuilding for each year and each decade, if you will. And so I made a list, and at first it was like, okay, what flavor of bubblegum do I like, and what kind of cereal would I prefer, and do I want it with milk or with yogurt? Like, I had to answer those sorts of questions, but it was where I started. And I know that sounds simple and silly, but it's where I started when I was learning to build a want list or a desire list or a dream list, like an out of the park list. And so I tasked myself with 150 things, and this is book number 3, so I got a little better at it. Like, I think I got to maybe 30 or 40, and it got really frustrating when I first did this. Now I am at 144. Woohoo! And a lot of these boxes are getting checked. But it's a great place to start. And again, in building, future forward, I start with the list in my lab book. The second thing I do is I start to break down some of the stuff. Now, I own companies, and I really like that kind of stuff. And so I build out what they look like today, and then I also build out what I want them to look like. So if you're entrepreneurial like me, or if you're career oriented like me, having something to help you reset or help you establish where you're at so you can start the process of resetting is super ultra important. So I'll show you, I'm a huge fan of Post-its. So this is what I did for my company in 2020. Now I want to show you how we grew in a very short amount of time, where I had to revisit my company, and this is just one of them, but just kind of show you how you can kind of construct something that shows you growth, or that gives you the desired growth that you want to see in your organization. And this is what I do in my lab book. Now, again, I've taken another growth spurt, and so it looks a little different, because now I'm building things out differently. And so anyhow, the goal is that you're documenting, again, not necessarily what you have, but what you want and what you believe you have the potential to do. And even if you don't have the potential to do it, you can attract people that have the potential to help you do it. And so it's really something that I use to stretch myself so that I don't ever grow stagnant in a year or go from year to year. Another thing that I put in here is I break down programs, and I wishful think, right, for each individual program that my different organizations house. And then I idea dump as things are growing and I'm changing and I'm expanding cities and things like that. And then the other thing I like to do at the bottom of my lab books is I will date and signature, and so that it's time stamped, so that, again, someone after me knows that this was the process that I used to kind of expand or evolve. If you're just planning out, life for yourself every year or day by day, like if you're one of those people, which I used to be, like I would kind of do what the day dictated rather than dictate the day. I'm telling you, that's one of the most dangerous places to be. You want to be one of those kinds of people that determine, architect and determine what each day should look like, each month should look like, each year should look like, in the next 10 or 15 years. Because really, truly, the only person on this planet that really knows your destiny is you. And you should be pushing toward that with every tool you can every day. And I find that just writing this stuff down helps. Now, as we land this with a reset, I'm going to give you a couple other things that I do. Yes, I have my everyday, but again, I'm a little bit extreme. Yes, I have my next 10 or 15 years, but again, I'm a little extreme. This is my 2026. I also track my giving. I like to, make sure that I'm maintaining a level of generosity, because it's very important. I consider myself a very blessed woman, but I think that if you're blessed the way I'm blessed, or if you're benefited the way I'm benefited, then you should be helping people. So one of my systems of accountability for that is this. I track my giving, and I make sure that my giving aligns with my heart for people, and also the way that I'm growing and evolving by way of having resources. I don't like to hoard, and I want to make sure that I'm helping to take care of people the way people, took care of me when I needed help. So I keep a journal that tracks my generosity and my giving. So I set that up. And again, it's just simple lists by month. The other thing I set up is my new book, which I went through, my little guy. But if you're just getting started in all this, I'm going to show you where I really actually got started. And I still do this stuff. I just use little 3x5 cards. And so again, here's my top 10. And then these are things that I want for myself. And then these are things that I want for my family. I'm not showing you. Maybe another time. These are things that I want for one of my organizations. Here's the other. And these are things I don't do well with debt. So if I find it anywhere, I like to have a plan to get rid of it. And I'm acquiring real estate and properties. And so, that's a bigger debt ticket item, but I like to have a plan to retire it so that, as I'm building legacy for people, they're not inheriting my debt. They're just inheriting my assets. So that's very important to me. And then this is, some things that I speak over myself just to make sure that I'm keeping my head in the right place around the things that I feel that I could, that I deserve, because I work hard and I feel like I'm a good human and I feel like I help people, and it's easier for me to do all of those things and maintain that posture when my head and my emotions are sound. And so there's some things that I speak and declare over myself daily, my affirmations, and I put them here. I'm not showing you that, maybe another time. So again, these are my setups, my resets. But if you're not where I'm at, and that's okay, and you don't have the lab book and you don't have the daily notebook and the planner and the agenda, just start with note cards. The idea is that you reset yourself in a way that you set yourself up for success. And that comes with clarity. And clarity comes with writing things down and really taking the time and knowing yourself. So let's recap this. Reset time. Get yourself a notebook. Get yourself some note cards. Get yourself a lab book, a planner, something that you feel would be a good daily fit for you to do a handful of things. 1, track your victories. 2, determine your destiny in the form of goals and dreams. And 3, keep you anchored in the truth of who you are, whether that's a word for the year or your characteristics or your labeling as a professional. Document it in something that you're going to reference every day as you're resetting and growing forward. So I hope this little quick glance into some of my tools helped you. If it did, make sure you leave something in the comments. If you have tools that you use that work for you, again, these are just my things. I want to hear about your things. Share them with the rest of the audience because we want to know. And if this helped you and you like it, share it, subscribe it. The goal is that we're helping each other and we're growing together and we're helping other people grow as we're growing. So thank you again for tuning in to Sweet Tea Time. And I look forward to seeing you in the next year after we've all retired everything and fixed everything and tied up loose ends and reset. Happy New Year, and I'll see you soon.